Nostalgia, the one toxic relationship we all have, because no matter how many times it disappoints us or hurts us beyond explanation, we still let it back into our lives anyway. Nostalgia can be a very good thing, like when you're looking back on fond memories from your childhood, or it can be a bad thing, like when a network tries to reboot one of the shows that you think ended perfectly in an attempt to cash grab because they know the audience will watch the reboot of the show, and then it ruins the reputation and legacy of the show. So today, we're going to be going over a few reboots of shows and seeing if they've really found their footing as a TV show or if they fell for the reboot curse. And they were canceled before they really had a chance to find their footing. Or because they were bad and they were just bad. Like they've just been awful shows. Before we start going over some individual shows though, I kind of want to go over nostalgia as a topic and really kind of give an explanation as to how it will apply to these reboots we look into today. See, Webster's dictionary defines nostalgia as that thing that you remember from the past that makes you remember it, but not in a bad member way, but in a good member way. Now that's a real textbook definition and not one that I just made up just now. But if I had to it's so stupid. It's so stupid. But if I had to dumb it down for anyone, the best explanation for nostalgia I can give is like when you see your old ice cream shop you used to go to as a kid, or like the park you used to play in as a child, or when you see a deer on the side of the road that was hit by a car, and you think about that one time when you were a little kid and your dad hit a deer with a car, but you could have sworn it was a human, but he just kept insisting it was a deer. And then you had to deal with the grappling fact that your parents maybe hit a human with their car. No? You've never been through that? Okay, let's just move on then. So first off, I should probably clarify what exactly I mean by a reboot or revival because some people have different definitions for a reboot or a revival. I'm not talking about shows like Community or Arrested Development that were off the air and then rebooted back onto the air as a continuation of the original show. I'm talking about shows like Gossip Girl, Girl Meets World, and the first show we'll be going over today, Fuller House. So Fuller House was the 2016 Netflix revival or reboot of the original classic 90s sitcom Full House, which is a show that you'd only be watching if, like me, you were super white and raised on reruns at Nick at Night. Now, Full House is widely considered to be one of the best old-school family sitcoms on, like, entertainment in general, so when they announced that they were rebooting it and making it Fuller House with the original cast, a lot of people were really excited. I mean, like I said, almost the entire original cast was coming back for the show, with the exception of two very important pieces. And the show even sprinkled in some of the original side recurring characters throughout the 4 or 5 seasons of the show. But after 4 years and 5 seasons, the show was canceled for what I can only explain as a decline in product. And unfortunately, it's pretty telling as to why. See, the original Full House followed a very clear and concise path episode to episode that revolved around the talents of John Stamos, Dave Coulier, and the late Bob Saget.
Bob Saget raped and killed a girl in 1990.
But in this show, they really give the keys to the show to the kids, Jodie Sweetin, Candace Cameron Bure, and Andrea Barber, who haven't really done much in the acting world since the end of Full House. I mean, Candace Cameron did a bunch of Hallmark movies, and I think Jodie Sweetin did stuff, but Andrea Barber, who plays Kimmy Gibbler, literally retired from acting after Full House. And like, she came out of retirement to work on Fuller House. And unfortunately, as a result of this, the early seasons heavily relied on the original trio of John Stamos, Dave Coulier, and Bob Saget.
Raped and killed a girl in...
And their acting and their ability to hone in on their original characters really helped carry the plot lines and some slow storylines throughout the show's early seasons. And unfortunately, it just, like, wasn't the original. They weren't able to capture the original magic of Full House. Like, don't get me wrong, the original actors played their roles super well and they're still very true to their original characters. It just doesn't necessarily apply to the current generation of sitcoms. And unfortunately for the show, it just never really found its footing until the later seasons, and by that point Netflix had already announced that it was stopping the show. And while a lot of fans of the original show probably said they really enjoyed this show, I almost guarantee you they can't name any of the new side characters on the show. Like, who's that guy? Okay, what about that guy? And who's that guy? And whose dog is that? But now that we've gone over what I consider to be a pretty mediocre reboot, let's go over one that I've really enjoyed. So in the late 2010s, it was rumored and then confirmed that iCarly would be getting a reboot on Paramount's new streaming service, Paramount+. For anyone who's been living under a rock for the past like 20 years or didn't check out my iCarly video from a few weeks ago, iCarly was a Nickelodeon sitcom that ran from 2007 to 2012 and was one of Nickelodeon's most successful sitcoms of all time. However, after the show wrapped, there were a lot of controversies surrounding the showrunner, Dan Schneider, and his treatment of the cast, mainly Jeanette McCurdy. And at that point in time, the idea of an iCarly revival was almost slim to none. But then our prayers were answered, because the iCarly reboot was announced without Dan Schneider in it. And also, unfortunately, without Jeanette McCurdy, but she's like a successful author with a podcast and stuff now, which is like really cool, so good for her. But anyway, there was a level of cautious optimism surrounding this show, because people were really wondering if they could replicate the magic of the original iCarly. And unlike Fuller House, iCarly has really separated itself from the original show, while also maintaining the magic that kept the show as good as it was back then. It definitely had quite the rough start, with a lot of it relying heavily on the old show, including bringing back a lot of recurring characters from the old show in very obscure ways, but while slowly introducing us to these new characters in the universe. However, where I think the show really found its footing was in the second episode of the second season of the new show, I Object Lubert. In the episode, the old lobby, doorman, butler, weird wart man Lubert is suing Carly for all the pranks that her, Sam, and Freddie did on iCarly back in the original show. And let me tell you, this episode pulls all the stops. I mean, they get Guppy, Gibby's brother, because Noah Monk doesn't want to be on the show, and Chuck, played by Ryan Ochoa, who was the kid who used to spray Spencer in a cage with mysterious liquid. And I feel like that joke shouldn't have ran on Nickelodeon in the mid-2000s, but that's not the point. And it was a great episode, but that being said, I feel like it was the point in time that the show really stopped relying on old side characters from the original show, and from then has really gone in its own direction. I mean, since then, the show has really focused on developing characters like Harper, Carly's roommate, and Millicent, Freddie's stepdaughter, and whatever character Josh Peck plays, where I think they just wanted to shoehorn in Josh Peck for Drake and Josh fans. And it allows the show to really explore more mature subjects, as this is a more mature show now.
Game over, bitch!
While also maintaining the magic of the original series. And thankfully, it did all this before it fell victim to relying too heavily on the old cast and the old show, like Fuller House did. Also, they better make a goddamn season 4, because you can't leave it on a cliffhanger like that. I'm looking at you, Paramount. So all in all, I feel like it's pretty safe to say that reboots and revivals in general can really be a hit or miss thing. And it's all dependent on how those revivals stand on their own 2 feet. And honestly, what it comes down to is if the show and that universe have more stories to tell in general. Because if you fabricate the stories and make ridiculous plot lines, people aren't going to want to watch. Wait, I gotta check. I said feet. Is Dan Schneider anywhere? Because if you do that, all you're doing really is giving fan service for people to pay money for your subscription services and not actually giving them a show that is good. Either way, let me know what other shows and reboots and revivals you want me to cover in the comments, and consider subscribing for more rants like this. And if you want to check another video out that might be cool for you, maybe the iCarly one, whatever YouTube recommends, check that out right here. That's this week's Stop in the Knowledge Corner. I'll see you next week.